In the dimly lit conference room of an undisclosed military facility, 12 men and women sat nervously around a polished oak table. A single, unmarked folder lay before each of them. Their names, their pasts, and their very existence had been meticulously erased from public record. They were no longer citizens of Earth, but rather operatives in a mission that defied all comprehension. At the front of the room stood Colonel Haskins, a stern-faced man whose eyes bore the weight of secrets that could shatter the world. "You are not here by accident," Haskins began, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the tension like a knife. "You are the best of the best, hand-picked for your skills, your loyalty, and your ability to keep your mouth shut. What you are about to hear does not leave this room." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that precedes a revelation that can change the course of history. He pressed a button, and the room darkened as a screen behind him flickered to life. The first image was grainy, like an old photograph taken in haste, showing what appeared to be a spacecraft unlike anything built on Earth. "This," Haskins continued, gesturing to the image, "is an alien craft that landed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And no, this is not some conspiracy theory. This is the truth that's been hidden from the public for decades. The beings who piloted this craft are known as Ebens, from a planet we call Serpo, located in the Zeta Reticuli star system." The operatives exchanged glances, trying to process what they were hearing. Haskins went on to explain how the initial contact had been accidental, the result of a crash that exposed the Ebens to human civilization far earlier than they intended. What followed was a cautious but steadily growing relationship between the Ebens and the U.S. government, conducted in the shadows of secrecy and denial. In 1965, Haskins said, eyes narrowing with intensity, an agreement was reached. The Ebens would share certain technologies with us, and in return, we would send a team to their planet to learn about their culture, their technology, and most importantly, to establish a long-term diplomatic exchange. The room fell silent as the operatives processed the enormity of what was being proposed. They were not being briefed on some distant mission in hostile territory. They were being asked to travel to another planet, light years away, to live among extraterrestrial beings for 10 years. It was an assignment from which some might never return. The 12 operatives were given a week to decide. Despite the danger, the allure of the unknown proved too great. One by one, they accepted, signing away their rights, their identities, and perhaps even their lives. And so began the most secretive and audacious mission ever undertaken by mankind. Months of rigorous training followed, both physically and mentally, as they prepared to leave everything they knew behind. They studied the Ebens language, a complex system of tones and symbols that resembled no human dialect. They underwent medical procedures to strengthen their bodies against unknown atmospheric conditions. Every detail was scrutinized, every contingency planned for. The team, composed of scientists, doctors, engineers, and military personnel, knew they were embarking on a one-way trip into the abyss of space. The day of departure arrived without fanfare. The operatives were taken to a remote desert location, where the Eben spacecraft awaited, hidden under a massive camouflaged structure. The ship was sleek and silver, its surface reflecting the barren landscape around it. It was unlike any machine ever seen on Earth, both beautiful and unsettling in its alien design. The moment the 12 astronauts stepped onto the alien spacecraft, something felt off. They had trained for years, studied every scrap of information about the Ebens and their technology, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of the ship. The air inside was heavy, almost humid, with an odd metallic taste that clung to the back of their throats. The walls were not smooth like those of their own spacecraft. Instead, they seemed to ripple, a subtle and unnerving movement just at the edge of their vision. Commander James Hart, the mission leader, immediately noticed the discrepancy between what they were briefed on and what they were now experiencing. The ship didn't feel like a machine, he recalled. It was more like stepping into a living organism. There were no control panels, no buttons, just surfaces that reacted to touch in ways we couldn't fully comprehend. The Eben pilot, a small, spindly figure with large, dark eyes, motioned for the crew to follow. It moved with an eerie, fluid grace, its limbs bending in ways that made the humans uneasy. As they made their way through the dimly lit corridors, the lights seemed to flicker in response to their presence, casting strange, elongated shadows that shifted and twisted as they walked. Dr. Sarah Collins, the mission's lead biologist, was the first to notice the temperature fluctuation. One moment it was freezing cold, the next it was stiflingly hot. It was like the ship couldn't decide what environment to maintain. We thought it might be adjusting to our presence, trying to accommodate us, but it was more disconcerting than comforting. Then the noises began, soft, almost imperceptible at first. Strange clicks, whispers, and distant hums that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. The team members exchanged uneasy glances but pressed on, trying to focus on their mission protocols. But every step felt heavier, every breath more labored, as if the ship was drawing energy from them. Dr. Mark Thompson, the physicist, described a sense of spatial disorientation that set in shortly after they boarded. The corridors kept changing. I know it sounds insane, but one moment a hallway would stretch for what felt like miles, and the next it would shrink to just a few feet. It was like the ship was warping around us, playing tricks on our senses. The team reached what they assumed was the main control room, but there was no traditional cockpit, no seats or windows. Just a vast, open space with floating orbs of light that moved in synchronized patterns. As the Eben pilot approached a central pedestal, the lights around them began to pulse rhythmically, creating an almost hypnotic effect. It felt like the ship was communicating, but not in any way the astronauts could understand. Suddenly the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered erratically, and the walls began to emit a low, vibrating hum that resonated in their chests. Hart ordered everyone to brace for impact, but there was no impact, just a sudden, unnerving stillness that seemed to stretch time itself. It was like the whole ship had frozen in place, recalled Lieutenant Paul Garcia, the communications officer. And then, without warning, we were moving again, but it wasn't like any motion I've ever felt. There was no inertia, no acceleration. It was as if the ship was slipping between spaces, like we were falling through the universe. The external view shifted from the familiar star-speckled blackness of space to something completely alien. The stars outside were wrong. Too close, too far, and tinged with colors none of them could quite name. Parker was glued to his instruments, but none of the readings made sense. It was as if the known laws of physics had been momentarily suspended. Hart tried to establish communication with the Eben pilot, but the alien seemed entirely focused on the strange controls. When Hart touched the nearest wall, he felt an odd, faint pulse, a rhythmic throb that synced uncomfortably with his own heartbeat. It wasn't just a ship. It was a living entity, and they were trapped inside it. The journey continued in near silence, broken only by the occasional, unsettling sounds that seemed to come from the ship's inner workings. Dr. Collins noticed small, almost imperceptible changes in the environment around them. Tiny motes of light that drifted through the air like dust, but vanished when touched, and walls that subtly shifted texture from metal to something that felt unnervingly like skin. The Eben pilot made a series of clicks and gestures, and suddenly the walls became transparent, revealing the outside environment. They were approaching Serpo, a planet bathed in the glow of its red sun. The surface below was a mix of jagged mountains, vast deserts, and strange, dark oceans that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. But it was the sky that caught everyone's attention, a deep, oppressive crimson that cast a haunting glow over everything. Garcia described his first sight of Serpo with a sense of awe and dread. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The colors were all wrong, like something out of a nightmare. It felt hostile, like the planet itself didn't want us there. As the ship descended, the strange gravitational anomalies intensified. Objects would suddenly feel heavier or lighter, and at one point, the entire crew experienced a brief sensation of vertigo so severe that several members collapsed to the floor. It was as if the planet's gravity was fluctuating, pulling and pushing them in erratic, unpredictable ways. The descent finally stabilized, and the ship touched down on the surface with a soft, almost gentle thud. The astronauts felt an odd stillness settle over them, but it wasn't comforting. The walls of the ship slowly retracted, revealing the alien landscape in all its eerie splendor. The atmosphere was thick, humid, and laced with that same sweet metallic tang they had tasted on the ship. They stepped onto the surface of Serpo, their boots sinking slightly into the strange purplish sand. The air was filled with unfamiliar scents, sharp, acrid, and faintly floral, unlike anything on Earth. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to shift independently of their movements. Commander Hart gave the order to proceed, but every step felt heavier than the last. They were on Serpo, an alien world billions of miles from home, but as they looked around at the landscape and then back at the still, silent ship, the feeling was inescapable. They weren't just explorers, they were trespassers in a place where they didn't belong, surrounded by a technology and a landscape that defied everything they understood. And as they began their first steps on the surface, none of them could shake the unsettling feeling that they were being watched. Not just by the Ebens, but by the planet itself. Serpo was a world of two suns, a searing, bright star that dominated the sky, and a smaller, cooler star that cast a reddish hue over the landscape. The terrain was rocky and desolate, dotted with strange, twisted plant life that seemed to writhe under the relentless sunlight. The heat was oppressive, far beyond what they had trained for, and the radiation levels were dangerously high, forcing them to wear protective suits during their initial explorations. The Eben City was an intricate network of low, domed structures, built from materials that shimmered with an almost organic quality. There were no roads or vehicles. The Ebens moved about on foot, communicating silently through subtle gestures and telepathy. It was a society without conflict, without the noise and chaos of human civilization. Technology was seamlessly integrated into every aspect of their lives, yet there was a simplicity to it, a sense that their advanced capabilities were used not for control or conquest, but for harmony and sustainability. The operatives quickly realized that Serpo was as much a challenge to the mind as it was to the body. Time behaved strangely on the planet. Days stretched far longer than those on Earth, and the operatives found it difficult to adjust their sleep patterns. Food was another obstacle. The Eben diet consisted of a bland paste-like substance that provided all necessary nutrients, but left much to be desired in terms of taste. The operatives' Earth-supplied rations were carefully rationed, but ran out faster than anticipated, forcing them to adapt to the alien diet sooner than they had hoped. Communication with the Ebens was an ongoing struggle. While they had learned basic phrases during training, the complexity of the Eben language and their telepathic nuances were beyond human comprehension. Still, bonds slowly formed. One Eben in particular, whom the operatives nicknamed Ebo, took a special interest in them, serving as a guide, translator, and occasional mediator when cultural misunderstandings arose. As months turned into years, the operatives began to unravel the mysteries of Eben society. The Ebens had no concept of war or violence. Disputes were settled through consensus and an almost mystical sense of shared purpose. They had no formal government, Leadership was fluid, based on knowledge and wisdom rather than power or hierarchy. Their technology, though advanced, was often used in ways that seemed mundane by human standards. Energy sources that powered homes rather than weapons, machines that enhanced agriculture rather than industry. But there were darker revelations as well. The operatives learned that the Ebons had been observing Earth for centuries, long before their fateful crash in Roswell. They had witnessed humanity's evolution, our wars, our technological progress, and our self-destructive tendencies. The Ebons saw humanity as a species on the brink of greatness, but also on the verge of catastrophe. Their motivations for the exchange program were not purely scientific or altruistic. They were trying to understand whether humanity could be trusted, whether we were capable of joining a larger interstellar community without bringing our inherent conflicts with us. The operatives documented everything they could: Ebon technology, social customs, medical practices. But over time, the strains of life on Serpo began to take their toll. 2 of the team members fell seriously ill, their bodies unable to cope with the planet's harsh conditions. Despite the Ebons' advanced medical knowledge, the operatives' physiology was still too alien, and the 2 eventually succumbed to their ailments. The loss was a stark reminder of the risks they had accepted and the fragile line they walked between exploration and survival. As the years passed, tensions within the group began to surface. The prolonged isolation, the alien environment, and the constant uncertainty about their eventual return to Earth took a mental toll on the operatives. Some questioned the mission's purpose, wondering if they had been sent not as explorers, but as pawns in a diplomatic game they couldn't fully understand. The sense of unity that had bound them in the early years began to fray as doubts crept in, each operative wrestling with their own private fears. The harsh environment of Serpo continued to challenge them in ways they hadn't anticipated. The dual suns played havoc on their circadian rhythms, leading to sleep disorders and chronic fatigue. The Ebon food, though nutritious, lacked variety, and the psychological impact of consuming the same tasteless paste every day gnawed at their morale. Simple pleasures from Earth, things they had taken for granted, became painful memories. Fresh air, familiar foods, the sound of rain. The operatives clung to small routines and rituals to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the cracks in their resolve were becoming evident. Of the original 12, 2 chose to remain on Serpo when the mission's 10-year mark arrived. They had grown accustomed to the alien world, finding a strange peace in the quiet simplicity of Ebon life. The remaining 8 prepared for the journey home, their minds and bodies forever altered by their experiences. They had witnessed wonders that defied human understanding and horrors that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The return journey was uneventful, yet filled with a heavy sense of finality. The operatives had left Earth as explorers, but they returned as ghosts, destined to live out their days in secrecy, their mission classified at the highest levels. They were debriefed extensively, their memories scrutinized and documented, yet much of what they had experienced was too surreal, too otherworldly to fully convey. Back on Earth, the operatives were confined to a secure facility where they underwent medical evaluations, psychological testing, and relentless debriefings. They were bombarded with questions about Ebon, technology, culture, and every minute detail of their time on Serpo. The operatives recounted their encounters with alien medicine, agriculture, and the Ebon's peculiar method of communication, blending vocal sounds with telepathic impressions that lingered in the mind long after the conversations had ended. Despite the rigorous debriefings, much of what they had seen and experienced was deemed too complex or too alien to be immediately useful to Earth's technological and scientific understanding. The government scientists were particularly fascinated by the Ebon energy systems, clean, renewable sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics as humans understood them. However, replicating such technology on Earth proved to be a daunting task, hampered by the incomprehensible science that drove it and the ethical implications of wielding such power. The operatives' stories were meticulously documented, but quickly locked away, sealed in classified files that only a handful of top officials would ever have the clearance to read. The 8 who returned were given new identities and relocated, their true pasts erased to prevent any potential leaks. They were instructed to live out their lives quietly, forbidden from ever discussing Serpo or the Ebons with anyone outside of their tightly controlled circles. They were not heroes but secrets, kept in the dark corners of history, their names erased from every record. But the memories could not be erased so easily. Nightmares haunted them, vivid flashes of the twin suns, the silent cities of Serpo, and the somber, knowing eyes of the Ebons. Some operatives struggled with severe health issues, lingering side effects of exposure to the high radiation levels on Serpo and the alien pathogens their bodies had never been designed to fight. They were monitored closely by the government, but most of their ailments were brushed aside as collateral damage of a mission too important to have been abandoned. Years passed, and the operatives faded into obscurity. Whispers of the Serpo mission occasionally surfaced in conspiracy circles, dismissed as fantasy or misinformation. Most dismissed the idea as another wild theory spun by those obsessed with extraterrestrials and government cover-ups. But the operatives knew the truth, and they carried it with them, an invisible burden that weighed heavier than any medal or accolade could ever offset. In the end, their mission remained one of the most secretive operations ever conducted by any nation. The technology they had witnessed, the cultural insights they had gained, were locked away in government vaults, buried beneath layers of denial and disinformation. The operatives lived out their remaining days knowing they had touched the edge of the unknown, glimpsed a future that humanity was not yet ready to embrace. As they aged, the operatives' numbers dwindled. Some died quietly, their secrets buried with them. Others, in their final days, hinted at their extraordinary past to loved ones, knowing those whispers would never be believed. The truth, as extraordinary as it was, remained hidden in plain sight, a testament to humanity's relentless curiosity and the price we pay when we reach beyond the stars. And somewhere, light years away, under the eerie glow of twin suns, the planet Serpo continued to spin, its secrets safe in the silence of the cosmos, waiting for the day when humanity might once again venture beyond its fragile home and confront the vast, unknowable universe that lay beyond.